Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jarrell Mason, aka J Mason. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Album Cover, where we get inside the entertainment industry with those in the know and give them their flowers while they're here to be celebrated. With me right now, I have no stranger to the podcast, my man Dave VJ, and this is part two of a conversation that we had previously, which is now available on all streaming platforms and on YouTube at youtube.com/slash Beyond the Album Cover. Dave, thank you for coming back on. How are you?
I am good, and thank you very much for actually having me back. Yes.
Yeah, we had to continue. We left so much meat on the bone for part one. We had to do a part two. So let's go ahead and jump in with no delay. So, kind of mentioned it in part one, we were talking about Top of the Pops. For those that don't know, Top of the Pops, it was the UK's equivalent to American Bandstand. They actually did a short lived version here in the US in 1987 with Nia Peoples that didn't last long, but it became a mainstay in the UK where generations of kids and adults alike were reared off of this show, and it was one of those shows that could make or break an artist in the UK. So let's talk about the significance of Top of the Pops and how an important role it played in launching a music act over in the UK and in Europe.
Hey, the biggest thing about it, well, what I say is the biggest thing. The thing about it, it was never going to fail because it was attached to the BBC. Okay, so it's like I have a radio station and I have a TV station. So the BBC, you have BBC One, you have Radio One, and they're connected. So they both ran in tandem. It came on every single Thursday. The actual chart itself came out on a Sunday. It was a top 40. I can't remember how long it lasted because it's so long ago. It was a shame when it finished because it was such a staple of mine and so many people growing up. And I did watch Casey Kasem. Casey Kasem was like, it came on at like maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, but I had to stay up and watch it because I was so um, into American music. I remember the first time watching Onyx Slam on there, thinking this is going to be a huge record worldwide, being told by my programming director at Kiss that it wasn't, and then later on he came and said, "Yeah, you were right." Of course, I know I was right because I'm a hip hop head. Anyway, so the BBC have control, or used to have control, of Top of the Pops. So the same DJs that were on during the daytime or whenever on the radio also were the presenters on the show. That show broke so many people. It came on, I think the very first thing that they had in the UK before that was a program called Ready Steady Go. That was when I was a child, so I can't really remember much about it. But it was that long ago. It was in black and white, and it was also one of those things where you had the Motown era was there. So it's a just tiny little bit before my time. I can't remember why it went off, but it did. Top of the Pops. I don't know if it replaced it, but that was my era. So Top of the Pops was a 70s program. I don't remember it being before that. So I can remember it when I was at school, and I was at school in the 70s. And it was unbelievably influential. It was influential until my station came along, Kiss, and just went, we ain't here for that. We're here for underground records. And so our lifestyle became a culture. And so the only people that really stuck with Top of the Pops and Radio 1 were people who didn't live in London. But as with anything, whatever London did, the rest of the UK did, and then it bled into Europe, and then it at times went into the rest of the world. There were records that quite a few times they brought them into the UK as an import, and they became hits, and then they shipped them back to you guys. So, for instance, Lisa Lisa and Cult Jam, they were records that were big, like crazy big in the UK, and made big by London. And of course, then you get them on Top of the Pops, and the executives for that particular label would have been CBS back in the day or Sony, and they saw it, and of course, then they get behind it. But a good record, as far as I can see, is always a good record. And the reason why I say that, if you think about Nicki Minaj, when she did that record that had No More I Love Yous in it, it was originally done by Annie Lennox, Before that, it was done by, oh God, I can't even remember the name of the band. But I liked it. I bought the album just for that one record. So before Annie Lennox did it, it was done by another group. Yeah, it's gone out of my head. But it's that long ago. And the point I'm trying to make is a good record is a good record is a good record. It just might come before its time. So, of course, somebody else then takes it on, and then somebody else takes it on, and so on and so forth. And I know that I'm getting older because records that are from the 90s are being covered or sampled. And so you realise that, yeah, but you know, young people are going, oh, this great old school record. And like, ugh. And that's what the whole Top of the Pops thing created foundation, because a lot of those records were original. They were original. My parents then, you know, well, more my father, because my mum never bought a record in her life, as far as I know. His records were the records that I were hearing sampled when I got into rap music. You know, the records, for instance, when you listen to Arabian Rakim Paid in Full, there's a version that has Hazza something, I can't remember her name properly, but it was done by some friends of mine, Cold Cut, who were on Kiss at the time, and they did a 7-minute version, and they had a cut up of all different old records in it, including, of course, Ashley's Rope Clip, which was the original that they sampled or looped, whatever, to do it. The point I'm making here is that for us in the UK, without Top of the Pops, there is so many records that you just would not hear. Yeah, and it also brought a revival to people. So Who Wants to Be Like the Joneses, which was done by The Temptations. The version that worked was by a DJ friend of mine called Dr. Bob Jones. And it later on got sampled by Will Smith. Preferably not him, but the drum track was. And then they sued and won because they didn't ask permission, because it was supposedly an original drum track. Once again, it's that thing of the UK leading so much. I mean, when you think about the styles of music that have come out of the UK, and there's very few other styles that blow up worldwide, because there's pockets of music that work wherever they come from, you know. So that whole kind of the two-step stuff that come from the States, it comes to the UK, but it's not quite the same. It's a very localized situation, and then it becomes localized in parts of the States as well. But in the UK, I can't remember if I said this before when we were talking before, but just to let people know, you got UKG, which is a cross between house, garage, and MCing and singing. You got drum and bass, which once again is very influential from reggae, because it was jungle, then it went to drum and bass, and you got different styles of drum and bass. So you have intelligent and so on and so forth. We call house music, I think it was called garage, or garage as it's said in the States, but we had the whole warehouse party thing that made that big for us. It was, you know, the Farley Jack Master Funks and the Daryl Pandys and all those kind of things, you know, that made those records. It was the UK that made those records big. Well, at least London made those records big, and then it spread to the rest of the world. Daryl Pandy, I remember seeing Daryl Pandy on Top of the Pops. I didn't know what he looked like, you know. I see him on that Top of the Pops doing Love Can't Turn Around. You know, all those records without Top of the Pops, those records just don't spread. I think that's the thing about Top of the Pops, because Top of the Pops was all about sales. So you had your first day sales. It was all about the record companies would do, well, as time goes on, I realise that they weren't necessarily legal, but they just did things. For instance, a Michael Jackson record comes out, and the record company will say, okay, we'll ship 1 million, but they're not waiting to find out what gets shipped back. So, of course, that goes onto the chart on the BBC Radio 1. That then goes into Top of the Pops, and that is a #1 record. if you've got an independent record in those days, I can't remember the governing body. It's called Radar now for radio, but they had another governing body at the time. I can't remember what it was called, and they were the ones that counted what the sales were. And those sales then made you go to Radio 1, and that Radio 1 would then be what comes on top of the pops. And there was no simulcast at the time. So there wasn't, there was no mobile phone, there's none of those things. So when you heard the chart, you would wait till the following week to see what the acts looked like. What did they look like? What did Madonna look like? What did Princess look like? What did Loose Ends look like? Because just because we came from the same place doesn't mean we knew what Loose Ends looked like. In terms of, there is no words to describe how important Top of the Pops was to the UK. None. Because there was nothing else to compare it with until later on when you had a few other shows that came on, because when it died, there was nothing to replace it. And it wasn't a digital era. It was still and that was before cassettes. Not cassettes, I mean before CDs. So it was cassettes and vinyl, that's all. And then you had a thing called a single, So they would then start to add those things up. I'm not sure that I ever thought it was fair, but they counted every single thing. So if you sold a 7-inch, you sold a single, you sold an album, you sold a 12-inch, all those things counted in however they put them together. Mm. In terms of like records that you would hear, I mean, name me a record in the States from the UK that was imported, and I can probably give you more information about it. The point I'm trying to make is the correlation between us and you guys, because a lot of those things just slid by because they were underground records. So lots of records, for instance, the Full Force record, shipped it over here to maybe 5 people as a white label, and we just decided it was a great record. I think I told you in the last episode, my friend Steve played it for a whole hour.
Yeah,
I told Cult Jam that when I spoke to them as well. That was in the days. Top of the Pops had nothing to do with that record being big. Just the scene I came from made that record big, as did lots of other records. So when you're looking at Top of the Pops, seeing, let's say, Oliver Cheatham get down Saturday night, we were playing it probably a year and a half before. And what you would have is certain people would stand in the record shops, watch the DJs and the public buying records, and then they would decide, okay, somebody's bought 10 of those records, when normally you'd probably sell 1 or 2, maybe even 50, maybe even 20. Now I got to go investigate and see whether or not it's a record that I can put on a release. So you get the 12-inch of that, you make a 7-inch version, and try and get it on Radio 1. You get on Radio 1, you get on Top of the Pops, if the record gets inside of the top 20, because they only showed the top 20. They did a countdown, going up, going down, non-movers, movers, all that kind of stuff. But it was from a 40 to a 20. So you would get honourable plays. You might play 30 seconds of a record. But when they get to the top 20, you then, all the ones that are going up, those are the ones that get played. The ones that are going down, all that are stuck, they wouldn't play them, because with the top 20 and only half an hour, because the show Top Pops was only half an hour long, so they had to really, really cram it in. So anybody who's watching, who's from the States, there is I guess the UK has its own scene now, but when I was growing up, we absolutely idolized Kiss FM WBLS, because we were looking for the next thing all the time. We stepped outside of the BBC. We couldn't care less about Top of the Pops. I'll tell you that now. We didn't care about Top of the Pops once I got older. I did when I was a kid, because I didn't know any better. I didn't know any different. Didn't know that album cuts existed. They ruled us by playing what they wanted to play to us. And that's a bit like when you watch something on TikTok now and you're getting that one particular song and everybody's doing a dance to it. Well, you had with Radio 1 and with Top of the Pops, which were both BBC and still to this day, Radio 1 is still the biggest station, but it's owned by the government. So the British broadcasting system has stations from 1 to 6. Okay, and each one of them has a different, they're all on the same building or maybe around the corner, but they all come under the BBC Broadcasting Corporation and they all play different styles of music. And those situations there are controlling. They're controlling. They tell you what you want to hear. In fact, I don't know how they do it in the States now, but they've changed how you get records onto any kind of, I guess, MTV type platform or the radio. You pay, I don't know if it's everywhere, but from what I'm led to believe now, you got 6 records, you go to a plugger, you pay the plugger, and the plugger then tries to get your record on the radio. When they have their radio meetings, they decide whether or not it's going to go on or not. And usually you might get maybe 1 or 2, and they stay the same. And also, the no part of radio, you have to understand you have A-list, B-list, C-list, D-list, you have recurrence, and they flip them up. So a recurrent is a record that is always being and stays on the playlist. So let's just say it happens to be Radio 2 where they have a demographic of 90s people. So would that be, sort of 37 and upwards. And you can fit in records like an Aretha Franklin, but you can fit in a Faithless. Insomnia. You can fit in a Bob Marley. You might be able to fit in a Lila Ike. You have to know what your audience goes for. They're much more open-minded than before because Radio 2 was much older, much older. They weren't with it. When you think about Radio 2 now, it's nuts to be able to hear Sugar Bear Don't Scandalise Mine on a station like that, which was only in a club, or Young MC. Those are acceptable rap records to them. It's not necessarily my kind of rap, but it's a rap record that will go everywhere.
Yeah, so pretty much it's the same game, but different terminologies between the US and in the UK. Just seeing how, at least on the US side of things, how adult contemporary has changed to where my era of music, 90s and 2000s, is considered old school, where you hear Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney, a lot of the early 2000s pop boy bands is adult contemporary now. And just how you mentioned in the UK with the pluggers, same thing in the US. You got the indie record promoters that will go to the stations, pay for play. You got your heavy, you got your power, you got your medium, you got your light, you got your recurrence. So it's pretty much the same game, but it's just different names and terminologies.
The thing that is most prominent for my lifestyle is the underground controlled my whole life, and it wasn't being forced upon me. Me and my friends were always looking for what was next. What was next did not come on the BBC. It did not come on Top of the Pops. Like I said, it comes so much later. If you think when the first time I heard Ain't No Stopping Us Now, it was probably maybe over 9 months before it came to prominence for the rest of the world. So how it would work is you would hear a record in the club. If you liked it, you bought it as an import. I remember Ain't No Stopping Us Now cost me $2.75 or something like that. And then stupidly, for me, which it sounds stupid now, but this is what I used to do. If a record from my underground life became mainstream, I would buy the remix and I would literally give away the original, because it's no longer cool. Not interested, which was dumb, because now I've just bought a record for however much, and it's a different price altogether now because it's released in the UK. So it's gone from $2.75 as a 12-inch to less than $2 for a 7-inch or a single. Blah 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 blah. My whole life, like I said, I cannot state enough how my life was controlled by, and I liked it like that. Was controlled by the underground. It was all about knowing things first, knowing what's next, dressing differently, having different hairstyles. You know, it's there's like I said, there is no real words to describe it. I lived in a situation, and I'm grateful for it now. As I'm talking to you, I'm kind of flicking it back in my head. It was such a different thing because it just did not exist. It just wasn't there. We created it, and we didn't know we were changing people's lives. We just didn't know it. We grew into it, and now, from what I'm being told, because as you know, I'm outside of the UK at the moment. I'm being told it's turned into such a big thing, all this retro stuff. And also, I play a lot of re-edits. I've just started doing my own again. I've just literally just done one because I like that game. I like the old record, but sometimes you need to do a little bit of production on them. And that's where I've moved to. So the old records that in my underground world have now got a new lease of life, either as a re-edit or a slight remix, etc., etc. And from what I'm told, the younger people in their 20s, are coming out to those things. There's only two things really exist now: either retro or festivals. Club life doesn't really exist in the UK anymore. It's daytime parties do, so people will go by maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 9 o'clock it's over. You get home and you can go to work or look after your kids. Da 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 da. Da. You know, it's a very very different world now. But those people still want to party, but they don't necessarily want to spend that amount of money. They don't want to be out late, and so it fits a lot of worlds. And also being able to party with your kids or your grandkids. I mean, last time I was in the UK a couple of years ago, I played for my original crew at Carnival, and we had it's a big amount of people, a couple of thousand people, and my son was my MC because my son was a rapper. He's now got a different job, but he's still a great MC, and he was a DJ. So we worked really, really well together. And for that, I am grateful that, I had him very young. Me and his mum had him very young. And at the time, you're like, oh my God. But of course, you then get to like the same kind of music. My son is, at the time, he was really into New Jack Swing. He's a massive 50 Cent fan. He got me back into rap music because there was a period I was like, yeah, after 50, it ain't saying nothing. And then he just gave me enough information for me to start looking again. And now there are so many people that, are really, really, really good and deserve to be bigger than they are. Having said that, the infiltration of outside people who literally take you on, chew you up and spit you out, the bigger labels, it's better that you do like what Steve Stout is doing with his situation. You get a deal with him and you've got a better situation. You can be completely not famous or unfamous, if there's such a word, and make money. Mm-hmm. All of those things, I'm proud to, I'm not rich or anything, but I was part of the people that changed people's perception of music. I remember, as I was saying earlier on, being absolutely enamored with Casey Kasem and watching Onyx Slam, and I just like, this record is going to be huge. The programming director said, nah, it's just for your world, it's a rap record. And I was like, you don't get it. These guys are they're moshing. Same with House of Pain, Jump Around. You just knew it. Didn't know it was going to be that big, but mm-hmm. It's to me, I'm super proud of the world that I still live in, that I came from, which is an underground world, which we set the trend. Hip hop, them words. Who thought that hip hop would take it this far?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, which is crazy how you telling the story. PD is unconvinced that slam would work in the UK, where over here stateside, that record was a top 10 pop hit.
Well, it eventually became a pop hit and is still a staple. Probably not as big as House of Pain, Jump Around, but I just knew as because records. What people have to understand, if you're watching me for the first time and you don't know anything about me, know this, right? And I'm telling you this because I've been doing this for a long time. Records that work, right, are always, once a backing track is good, the one thing that will always work, records that give you instructions. Yeah? So if you think about Elephant Man, yeah, if you think about what's his name? Tony Matterhorn, Dirty Wine. You think about the cameo, the Electric Slide, which isn't really their record because it's Electric Boogie by Marcia Griffiths, and then it got put in The Best Man, and because they did it to cameo, it then ended up the rest of the world thinking, oh, let's do the cameo dance, and it's not the cameo record at all. But the point, once again, I am making is that it's a situation where you can participate and it has instructions. So once you can do instructions, you can do the dances. Some people are just like that. It's just the record's out of here. It might not even chart, but the record will always work for you as an artist, which means that you can keep eating for as long as you want.
Yeah, if you definitely get a record where it's a generational record, it can still get played at a barbecue, at a club set. You're gonna be eating good and still be on the road gigging and touring. Now, I want us to talk about the importance of Stock Aitken Waterman and what they meant to the music industry with them writing hits for Mel and Kim, Rick Ashley, Kylie Minogue, so on and so forth.
Oh, by the way, it's beginning to get dark now, so I don't know if you can see me because I now cannot see myself.
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, cool. All right, Stock Aitken and Waterman, they were good for the pop world, but they were beat jackers who were musicians. So Pete Waterman, he was an executive who understood this world that was going on to the left of centre, which was my world, which I guess you'd call it like jazz, funk, soul, underground, whatever. And just to give you context, Colonel Abraham's Trapped was a massive record. They then jacked the record and turned it into Rick Astley, Never Gonna Give You Up. A lot of people think, oh my God, yes, because I've played both records together and people can't, how can you not hear it? And that's what they did all the time. Every single record, they jacked one of those big black club records and just kind of watered it down for the pop world. And they did it over and over and over and over. They did it with Bananarama, they did it with Kylie, they did it with Jason, everybody. Yeah? And you cannot fault them. I'm not going to curse them out because that was genius. Because they're the ones who really made it, not necessarily the artists. They gave Kylie Minogue a really good career. But the point I'm making about Stock Aitken and Waterman, yes, they saw the gap and they took it. But really, it's that thing of always taking the music that we love, we created. And I say we because that was my life and they somehow infiltrated it and then regurgitated it in a slightly watered down way. In fact, no, slightly. They watered it down because it wasn't as beat heavy. You know, when you listen to like Colonel Abraham's Trapped, a very thick sounding record. I don't know if it was by design, but they didn't quite imitate the record. They didn't quite get it the way it was. But they did their version with everything that they did. And kudos to them. You know, they made a ton of money and a ton of hit records. They had a very big run for a very, very long time. In fact, I would really love to interview Peter Waterman because to me, they also, in a weird way, they opened up the underground to the mainstream by doing what they did.
hmm Yeah, they definitely did. Because I never put two and two together with Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up and Colonel Abrams Trapped until you mentioned it. Like, oh, this is just a diet version of that. Just almost when you pay Kylie Minogue's Look My Way with Rocksteady by the Whispers. Pretty much poppy version of the same record. I never put the two and two together, but like you said, what they did for the UK music scene should be recognized and cannot go unstated enough. And Peter Waterman was on a little show you may have heard of called Pop Idol, which of course launched on in the States as American Idol and introduced most US audiences to a man by the name of Simon Cowell, who was already a household name in the UK because of Five and being a record exec in the business, he already had a name for himself established. But in the US, American Idol really put him over the top. So let's talk about Simon Cowell.
I don't know him. I've never met him, but I know who he is. And he was a smart businessman. What you tend to find is lots of people who get to those positions, they understand the business. They understand the business better than most. So they then get. Oh, by the way, can you hear all the dogs barking in the background?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear the dogs.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So Simon Cowell, like certain, like say a Tommy Mottola, they understand the business. So they navigate the business to get what they want. They did it all the time. And once again, you cannot fault them because what people have to understand, he or she who controls the media controls the narrative. And so by going to the top of the tree, the Mount Rushmore of music, American Idol, all of a sudden, or Britain's Got Talent, all of a sudden, so my microphone came apart.
So you good
Sorry.
and go.
Yeah, so Simon Cowell, he he's just from a business point of view, he's a genius. I can't say that I agree with everything he does, but when you have a vision, and he's a non-musician, but has so much say on what's going on. That happened not just with Simon, but they used to find, and they probably still do it, when you didn't have the advancement of computers and being able to make music at home, somebody like Simon Cowell would go, well, I don't really like this. Can you do an edit? Can you make it more poppy? Can you make it more this? Can you make it more that? Whereas now you just make a record and you just load it up. The only thing that you might have to do is go and get it mastered properly by somebody who's got that right sonic for you. So there's a difference between you mastering on your computer and then putting it next to a record like, let's say, who's king of mastering or mixing? Dr. Dre. You know? So when you've got that kind of money, you get to manipulate everything. So, like I said, kudos to Simon for being able to have the vision, whether it's him or his team or whatever, to do those shows. So, Britain's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, and those shows that go around the world because they license them all. Some people don't like them, but I think they're worth it because you can get people come out of them for who would otherwise not be seen.
Mm-hmm.
Even looking at veterans who get on those shows, and on those shows, people come on who've had hits years and years ago, who still sound good, who might be backing singers, who might just want a chance to, let people know it was me that did this record and this is what I'm doing or still doing or I'm doing something new or whatever. You're always going to get the Simon Cowells of this world. There are people who are coming up. Now, I don't know everybody anymore, and I stick in my lane. I don't necessarily look at who's beyond, like who are the executives now,
Right.
because it just doesn't. They don't interest me. I still like my Jay Dillers, the Pete Rocks, the Primos as producers, but of course, there's your Hit Boys, Mustard, all these people as well. And there's people beyond them as well. And I know I'm old because when they say, yeah, Mustard's old now, it's old school, like what? Mustard's only been doing it for 2 minutes, you know what I mean? But anyway,
Right.
the same thing. So Pete Waterman was Simon before Simon. I think they fell out because Pete Waterman and Simon were doing the show together. And I think Pete Waterman was saying that Simon stitched him up or something or the other, so they parted. But Pete Waterman's got enough money to last him a lifetime, so he used to do a TV show as well, which I think it was his own show. And once again, it was that thing of, he had a show that came on at nothing o'clock in the morning, maybe 3 o'clock on a Saturday night. So I guess he filled airspace or airtime, which cost him nothing, except to film it. And he was one of the presenters. And if you look at what he was doing, it was heavy on his stuff, as so it should be. Because if it's your own show, why don't you do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Simon, I don't know too much about him outside of what he does, but I'll say that you've got to give a guy like that his flowers. But I think the days for people like that are over, and it doesn't mean he's going to stop, and it doesn't mean he should be stopped, but the dominance that they've had is gone because there's so many different platforms now.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the show that you're referring to with Peter Waterman, was it The Hitman and Her?
That's the one. That's exactly the one. Yeah.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Hitman and Her, that was a show where they would go around different clubs around the UK, get kids dancing, get to hear the songs that was popping in the clubs, and also through the Hitman and Her, I believe it was Jason Donald or Howard Orange from Take That was discovered as a dancer on that show.
Okay. No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and speaking of Take That, I'm just kind of thinking how bigger they would have been had social media would have been around in their era. And like we mentioned in part one, they were put together by Nigel Martin Smith, who saw what New Kids on the Block was doing. It was like,
Mm.
hey, why don't I do this? And they ended up forming and they covered Tavares. It only takes a minute, but they really broke out once those Gary Barlow original pieces started becoming massive hits, and they only had one big hit here in the States, and that was Back for Good, but that was at the tail end of their run, and then they ended up calling it a day. Gary went to do a solo career, and then Robbie Williams, who I put as their equivalent to Bobby Brown, became the solo star of the group and became massive worldwide, had moderate success here in the States. How big of a phenomenon you think Take That would have been had they would have been in the era of social media?
Do you know what? That's hard to say. That's hard to say. I'll tell you why. Because I always went off of the talent. The exposure, of course, comes with it. But if you think about, in my opinion, the most successful band of all time was probably New Edition. Because everything that they did, BBD, Ralph Tresvant, Bobby, and New Edition, and Johnny Gill, all of them hit. And nobody else you can think of has ever done that. And Take That didn't do that. Robbie Williams, I mean, he's part of the, Britain's Got Talent. He's one of the judges, or at least he was. I don't know if he still is. He has managed to get that whole wholesome guy next door image to the forefront when really he was the bad boy of the group. He was Bobby Brown. You know what I mean? He was a bad man. You know, he was the one that was into rap. He was the one that you'd see on stage breakdancing, etc. You know, in fact, I think, was it last year or the year before, he brought out a rap record. Yeah. And he ain't bad, you know. Point is, though, I couldn't tell you. My point. I don't know if they'd be that big. But then, would these K-pop groups that are flying now, would they be that big worldwide? Because they're definitely big in Korea for sure. But would they transfer? Because I'm seeing, you know, you're seeing people that you would not normally you're tending to have a certain type of demographic that this they like. I don't know. Let's just say Jackson 5 back in the day. It was mainly these people, and then it spilled over into mainstream. But K-pop was mainstream from the get-go. But that's because, once again, it is that underground thing. People, always looking for the next thing. So they don't care about what's on the radio. I can see this online, and this group has 1 billion hits. Why don't I ever listen? Because there's no K-pop band that doesn't have less than 500,000 hits. None. If you see 300,000, they've probably only been out about 2 months.
And I was curious to know, was there ever a UK act that you felt had the potential to break in the US, but for reasons or another, they just never pursued the US market?
I think there's ones that should have been even bigger. So, like, for instance, Junior, Loose Ends, I think both of them should have been even bigger. Maybe Lisa Stansfield. In fact, I just realised something. I just got a new remix of Been Around the World, which I've been playing. So who knows? Maybe she'll get a release of live. That the thing most people don't think about as a DJ. I don't go, these people are phenomenon. I like, this record is a phenomenon. So that one record does not translate to your other records, because if anybody knew what a hit was, you'd keep doing it. But I don't know, your Baby Faces, your LA and Baby Faces, or your Linda Perry's, your Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis's, those are phenomenons. You're not going to get people like that again. You're going to have somebody like a hitmaker or hitman who's going to do maybe 10 records, and then they just move along, because everything is controlled by the executives. I don't think it's the people who make the records. The people make the records, and then all of a sudden it's like, I like this sound. If it was done in a proper way, the kind of records that we're hearing, especially from the bashment world, where it's like a Shinsia, some of the records just wouldn't be allowed to come out. I know that you couldn't stop them, but the content is just extreme. So all I keep thinking, I remembered when I was playing, for instance, Akinelli, Put It In Your Mouth, and then that record, I was told not to play it anymore. And I get it, but when I was playing out, it's usually girls that's asking you for that record. That whole, the thing of, you're not supposed to play it. Now, those records have become the norm because of those records. My generation do have a lot to answer for, because we are thinking, oh my God, here's these mumble rappers. But they just want to be able to, they just want to play records for vibes, or play music for vibes, and get messed up taking whatever it is they're taking, and don't care. And I get it. I want to hear lyrics, but I still want to be able to dance with decent lyrics and decent melody. So I can't fault these people. They do what they do, but I will always be unhappy with the behavior of executives, because once it doesn't touch them or their lives, they're happy to put it out there. As soon as it doesn't fit their requirements, i.e., so what you're saying, Junior did Morning Will Come. Now, Morning Will Come, I think, is a better record than Love's Taken Over by Shantae Moore. But it's the same record. It's exactly the same record. Junior was the one who actually produced the Morning Will Come. And then I think he worked with Simon Law, who is one of Jazzy's keyboard players. And I don't know the full story, but the point is that it's about, this guy doesn't fit what we want, but she does. So Junior, for me, should have been a lot bigger. Yes, he's got Mama Used to Say and Too Late, but he's got a lot more records. Because I don't think Morning Will Come did anything in the States. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it did. Yeah, I don't think that record really popped. But listen to some of these UK acts, like when I first heard like Damage, Emanate, Mystique, Miss Dynamite. I'm like, oh, these guys really, could have made some noise in the US, had execs would have said this has the ability to cross in the US market. Because I remember Emanate, they did put out a US version for their video for I Got a Little Something for You. And then they covered Happy, which was made famous by Surface, but was originally done by an act called High Tension.
Mm.
And then that when Craig David exploded in the US, it was like, oh, because he came out of left field. Because I remember when Born to Do It came out here in the States, and when Fill Me In started getting airplay on BET, he was on Soul Train. I'm like, oh, it's different because they were using that two-step garage sound, which was
Mm.
alien in the US, and it was a breath of fresh air over here. Whereas over in the UK, that had been going on for a hot minute.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I think Craig David definitely got his flowers. He definitely deserved that. People can say the different things about him, but there's always going to be, as good as you are, there's always going to be somebody who's ready to pull you back. I mean, he's still doing his thing now. There is a UK scene from the rap scene, or from rap music, which they call grime. I think it's all hip hop. It wouldn't be born if it wasn't for hip hop, but they choose to separate themselves from that, and I get it. I think Wiley's the godfather of that, and he's an incredible rhymer. Incredible. Same with Kano, all those guys are incredible. I think a lot of those people can transfer, given the chance, but you have to get on a record. So, for instance, trying to think, there was a record that Snoop did. In fact, Snoop's done quite a lot of UK records, literally because he's been given a check. But some of them really, really work. So there was a record called Pass Out, and he was on that. And there's two versions. There's a regular kind of poppy kind of R&B record which he's on, but halfway through the record it switches to a drum and bass record. Because it's that timing. It's got that what would I call it? It's like a 3/4 timing, so it's not normal. Sorry, not 3/4, double time, I should say, double time. And those records, you have to take advantage. So when you've got Snoop on your record, you can then export it or import it into the States. But it's money, it's knowing the right people. I got my start from a guy called Paul. I think I may have said this to you, Paul Oakenfold. Now, Paul Oakenfold used to work for Russell, and Russell would give Paul everything, tickets to this, that, and the other, so he would give them to us. So we got to meet your PEs, your Eric B. Rakim, your LLs, all these people, because of that connection. And I think that's it. And it's slightly different now because, yes, you need the connection, but it's all business. It's, you understand that if you get in a room with somebody, you could go from having no money to being a millionaire. So it's very, very business-like. I don't think the organic situation that used to be is there anymore. I remember seeing Stormzy in the States being out there for a long time because he went out there, I believe he went out there on his own back, and he was given a situation, I don't know if he signed to Jay-Z, but I know he was put in a position where he could have done. I don't know if he did it or not.
Mhm. Yeah. And, for me, it's cool to see how, because of social media and because of the internet, the world is a lot smaller. And to see an artist like Elamine blowing up
Mm.
the way that he's doing, and how when I hear him, he's a mix of the neo soul era with Maxwell, Erica Badu, all of them, with a hint of PM Dawn, and I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Now he's definitely good. I saw him recently on the R&B Money podcast,
I saw his
and
interview too.
yeah, and that he knows his music, but I know he knows his music because of the management. Because I'm friends, I know both of them, his management, but I know one of them more than the other because one of them comes from around my way in the UK. So they have quite clearly done their research, because I will send stuff to the person that is one half of his management, and you can tell they're they're successful because they're very choosy about what they get behind. I just think, oh, this is all right, and I'll send it to to D, and sometimes you hear back, sometimes you don't. But they need a clean cut story. How can we get this from A to B? What do we need to do to make this work, and so on and so forth. Listen, I just realised I need to go and get my my mains, because the power is dying on the battery. So just pause.
All right, so we're going to talk about one of my favorite pop acts to come out of the UK who I felt should have been bigger here in the US, and that's Five. Jay, Abs Love, Rich, Sean, and Scott exploded onto the scene in the US with When the Lights Go Out, and even more so once they got that Disney special with Bewitched, which ran constantly here in the US. The first album did well, the follow up, not so much here in the States, but I felt had they would have had that breakout record, they would have been even bigger in the US. Now, rumor has it that Bye 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 was originally intended for them, but they passed on it, and we saw what happened with that. So, what was it about Five that stood out in terms of look and sound? And what do you think now that with them going on tour reunion wise, do you think that they could still have the ability to make new music and gain a newer following in addition to the ones that grew up with them when they first debuted?
Most of the time, I would say, if you're on a reunion tour, so it's like, you're a legend, so to speak, I don't think they can make good new records. It's very rare, very rare that they do them and come back. You're talking about, you have to be somebody who doesn't make a lot of records, but every time you do it, you make an impact, like a Maxwell. And the reason why why Five worked, it's different now because the acceptance on radio is different. The acceptance on television is different because of the internet. But it's still somebody at the top who doesn't look like you or doesn't come from your background controls what is heard. So to me, they made it because there was, like you said, you mentioned, Emanate, Damage, all them people, and Damage is out there all the time doing old school shows. They run around a lot. I remember being on a train with them maybe about 10 years ago, and they were going to the north of England, where I was going to. I was going to go and see a friend, and they were on, I think, in fact, sorry, they were coming back from doing a gig in the same area that I was in. I don't know them. I know of one of them because he is the son of a very famous reggae DJ in the UK. So Andre is the son of Daddy Ernie, he's as big as, like a David Rodigan. So Damage 5 were big because they were, at the time, they were the acceptable face of urban music. That's why. Simple as that. Because lots of other people did it better than them. But what you want is, it's like, if you listen to Stephanie Mills, they want our, they want our rhythm, they don't want our blues, and that's not necessarily the people the consumer. It's the people at the top who says, and that's why you need the right people. It's better now because the people who are beginning to have moved to the top, they grew up listening to a Jay-Z or a Foxy or even a Grandmaster Caz. So their behavior is different to somebody who came up in the Chitlin Circuit era or Jim Crow era, and it's like, it's cool, you can come to my party and I'll let you in the front door now, but you ain't sleeping at my house. That's what I feel. And that doesn't mean that I'm right, but I'm talking about my experience of those people who had a massive control over how the music business was built. So you've got these people, like your Simon, like your Peter, who had control over the situation, and they said what went where. Now, glad to say it's not like that anymore. It's still like that up to a point, but it's not completely like that anymore, thank goodness.
Yeah, because when you look at a group like Cat's Eye, they're pretty much a new remix of the girl groups of yesteryears. How we mentioned how at least back during the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, you had groups based on gender, based on race, based on genres. Whereas now, kids don't really think about that. Whereas, like, okay, I want to put together a group that has a white kid, black kid, Hispanic kid, Asian kid. I don't see race. I don't see being stuck in a particular genre. I just want to take what I love and just put it out. And it's good to see that the younger generations are not thinking in those aspects like previous generations did.
No, absolutely. Once again, everything comes back to your underground, whatever that is. So my underground music would have been, your Leroy Burgess, etc., that kind of thing, Patrick Adams, and Dennis Brown, so on and so forth, along with a mixture of pop, and then progressed into my lifestyle. Whatever is going on now, that is left of center. So, for instance, like Lola Young, I absolutely love Lola Young. In fact, I follow her on Instagram, and I typed something about her. I can't remember because I just couldn't believe that this girl was so young, and she does all sorts of music because it's soul, it's rock, it's funk, it's hip hop, and she's got that, DFA, don't give a attitude, and I think that's what makes her so big. I watched her in the UK do her thing, and without a record deal, people know all her songs, and then she transferred over to the States, and I don't know what you know about her, but I expect her to be double the size within 2 years of what she is now.
Wow. And then I just recently saw the Michael movie, and watching it kind of got me thinking of just how the era of star making was different then compared to now with social media buzz. With Michael, you had concerts, you had your appearance on a music show or on a variety show. And then in 1981, a little channel called MTV debuted, where, when we all know, was hesitant, flat out did not play black music because
Hmm.
they said it without saying it, where we want to appeal to middle America. We don't want Rick James being played in Iowa or Prince played in Nebraska. But the story goes, when Thriller was coming out and they wanted it premiered on MTV, Walter Yetnikoff, who was head of CBS Records, called up MTV and I believe spoke with Bob Pittman, who was over at MTV. Somebody quote me if I'm wrong. That if you don't play him, I'm gonna yank all of the artist roster off of rotation in the
Yes.
library on MTV. And that just shows you the power and the flex of Michael Jackson, to where he could command that much gravitas to have the head of his record label call what was the social media of his day to say,
Hmm.
if you don't break him, I'm going to break you by pulling our entire roster off the lineup.
Do you know what? I never thought of it like that because I suppose that's another part of it. I always thought they spend a lot of money on this. They think they believe in it, so they're going to threaten MTV. I, I mean, who knows if Michael Jackson had anything to do with that? But we all knew that he was good enough that if they could carry out that threat, and really have that much power. I haven't seen the film yet. I wanted to go, but then I realised. Well, we've had holidays and stuff here, so I pulled out from it. So I'm going to go and see it. It's probably on for a month here, so I'm going to go see it in the next couple of weeks. So, and I'll be able to talk to you on social media about it. By the way, my Facebook, I don't know what's going on, but it's off. So I have no Messenger, no Facebook. I'm trying to fix it at the moment, and that's a short version of something that's been going on for 2 weeks.
Mhm. And the thing I wanna bring up too with Michael and how MTV at the time wasn't playing black music. There's a interview where David Bowie, rest in peace, was being interviewed by Mark Goodman, who was an MTV VJ, and Bowie was grilling Goodman on why MTV isn't playing black videos. And of course, Goodman gave the company line answer. And of course, Bowie smelled through the BS real quick.
I've seen that interview. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah. And also, I remember him talking about computers and stuff coming to do stuff in the world. You know, it's going to, the world is changing. That was his conversation. So all of that, while he was talking about the same thing that was going on there. Yeah, a very insightful guy. I have to keep coming back to this whole underground world. It will always rule the rest of the world. So by the time radio picks up on, oh, this new thing, there will be something else. It will always be like that. That's what happened with us in Kiss, because we completely control the whole of the UK. People would come from up north to our gigs because we weren't playing Stevie Wonder, Isn't She Lovely? You know, we weren't even playing Do I Do. You know, we'd play, before it became something, we'd be playing That Girl, Ribbon in the Sky. Those records were not daytime records. We'd play those records, and once you play those records, it spreads to somebody else, to somebody else, to somebody else. That was how all of that stood out in that world. So we then got a license and we became legal. But once you become legal and money comes into it, you break that cycle of the underground. You can only really have something like that if you have what we call specialist shows. So that would be a hip hop show, a garage show, a drum and bass show. You're playing what is going on left of what the rest of the world is hearing. So the woman who works in the nursery, the nurses, that kind of thing, they are happy to listen to top 40 records, whatever they are. And we were like, I need the next thing. So I'm listening to Poor Righteous Teachers, and they're still listening to Sugar Hill Gang. And there's going to be the same thing now. It's going to change. It changes. The names change, right? But the thought process doesn't. You can say, well, tell your kids we're going to pull these records off the radio. They'll just go and find them. They will just go and find them. You've got social media, you know. So you've got YouTube, you've got Instagram, you know, you've got TikTok. How do people get these things? How do they hear about these things? It's like, look at it like this. Two instances very quickly. You're walking along with your child. Your child is maybe 2 years of age. Your child is just walking with you quite calmly. Somebody else is coming from the other way and they're walking with another 2-year-old. Those two-year-olds start to eyeball one another and start talking. It's like if you're walking with your dog, the second thing. Your dog, you're going one way and somebody coming with the dog the other way. Those are the people that connect. And that's the same thing with music. People draw towards people. If you are somebody who's a weed smoker and you're on holiday, when you go to the beach, you're going to start looking for a weed smoker. Me, I'm always looking for the DJ. I'm always looking for a Jazzy Jeff. I'm always looking for somewhere to party. I may not want to go, but I want to know who's doing what. In fact, if I'm going to go somewhere, I will probably ask the questions before I go, because I can never understand why you're going to go to a club and you don't know who the DJ is. At minimum, I need to know what style of music they're playing. I'm not turning up there if I'm on holiday, and you know what I mean? It's like, that's the point I'm making, is that like will always find like. So those K-pop records were always going to be big in other parts of the world, because especially you've got young girls who are looking for that next, inverted commas, whatever next is. K-pop is going to be here for a minute and then it will be whatever else. Because the truth is, K-pop is really watered down New Jack Swing. It's almost like Bruno Mars. it's like a whole load of Bruno Mars music, and Bruno Mars is, well, as we know, it is New Jack Swing, you know. Um, and the thing is, a lot of K-pop is produced by, I don't know if he still is, but he was doing it. Is produced by Teddy Riley. You know, he was out there for a hot minute, and
Yeah.
I believe somebody, I think it was Kay Warren from the UK, was doing it as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
because I read in Teddy's book, he said that he was over there working on K-pop because, like you said, they pretty much studied what we were doing here in the US with New Jack Swing and also with the 90s, early 2000s teen pop era. They just took that, put it on steroids because you got these entertainment companies that put out these groups like Sausage Links and just roll them off the assembly line ready to go.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. I don't think we'll ever catch up to what's going on. So, you know, you can see Simon going, oh, we've got this next, blah, 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 whatever. First of all, you can never believe what he says because look at what he did with Jennifer Hudson. He said she was never going to make it or whatever else, she couldn't sing, blah, blah, blah. But also, you know, he's an elderly executive who, the smart thing about management is you will have your people out there. You might be the face, but you're going to have your people out there who will tell you what's going on so you can keep them in the conversation so you can see like you look like you're in the know, or at least be on the pulse of the top 5 groups in whatever's going on. I think that is much the thing with everybody. I don't look now like I used to. Like I've got to the era where I don't care what's going on. I like a record and that's the end of it. You know, somebody just sent me a Jessie Ware record. Soulful as you like, great record. Right? But it turns out the record's 10 years old. I've never heard it in my life. You know, so I play records like that, like they're new. And how I put records to other people, new or old, is I put them in the mix. You just make sure they fit when you're playing a new record with an old record, an old record with a new record, and make sure they have the same kind of vibe so you don't lose the dance floor and people will go for them. They might ask, they might not. Most of the time when you're playing a club, nobody cares. Just don't play too much foolishness, you know what I mean? And they're happy with whatever you're playing.
Right. And last question I want to get you out of here on. So what in today's landscape of music and with social media, do you think that it's harder for somebody to get through all of the clutter to become a long-lasting impacting star, or is it where because we're inundated with so much content that you're constantly have to stay in everybody's face and people will forget you because it's here and quick and people don't digest music the same and allow people to breathe. There's no sense of mystique from the artist because you have to be out in front a lot, and only those if you have a cachet already built like a Beyonce, a Gaga, a Jay-Z, you can afford to be reclusive. But if you're somebody trying to get in, you don't have that luxury.
I don't think it matters. If you've got talent, you put your foot down on the gas and you stay in your lane. You think about it, to me, one of the best, probably one of the best albums ever is Reasonable Doubt. I think that record, for me, and this is before people even discovered Jay-Z, I played that album over and over and over and over. It worked for me immediately because they had samples that I knew the sound of, you know, and then of course got Brooklyn's Finest with him and Biggie, and then years later listening to the story by Clark Kent and how it all came together. You just find your lane and stay in it. That is it. Don't try to sound like anybody else. Once you've got you know, look at Speed, right? You know the YouTube sensation. He's here in the Caribbean at the moment. He said he started off with one person. He was going to chuck it in, and then he thought, okay, there's somebody watching me, so I'll keep going. Then he went to 2, then 4, and then 8, and so on and so forth till you know he's got the millions of followers he has now. He stuck with his lane. And that's what you have to do. You have to go, right, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm talking about Lola Young. Lola Young she has her fans. Now, the fans that like Beyonce may not like her, but on the other hand, they might do because, let's face facts, people, most people, especially young people, follow things because of trends. I can get somebody to like a record if you do a remix. So let's take Barbecue record number 1, Maze Before I Let Go. She does her version of it, and then she adds a marching band to it as well. Crazy. But the record has just got, I mean, if you're a barbecue person, you know the score. That record has been a staple for years and years. Just like Kenny Burke Rising to the Top, just like Don't Look Any Further by Dennis Edwards. All those records. So they will never stop being regurgitated, but it's a lane that fits a certain type of person. So it's going to be your mum, your dad, possibly your granny, depending on your age. If you've got your own lane, I think you can go as far as you can go with it. The social media helps. Social media definitely helps. You just have to keep doing you. So when I watch certain people, so for instance, one of the people that I always loved, and she didn't really get as far as she could have done, a rapper called Nitty Scott. Nitty Scott is a bad rapper. She's a Hispanic rapper, and she should be a lot bigger, but she has a lane. And so if you put out records as a person with your own lane and your own platform, like Eric Sermonstead on Drink Champs, you can sell, 1,000 records at $10. Yeah? All of a sudden, you've made yourself half a year's wages. There's people who will come out to see you all the time because they like you. You do everything, Ryan Leslie, prime example. Ryan Leslie understood technology before your average person did. He books his own venues. He has bands in different areas of the world that he works with, so he doesn't have to go around with a whole band, and teams everywhere. He's found his lane. He can go put on a night, let's say a jazz cafe, 2 or 3 nights that I know, and make probably 10 grand each night. Selling his merch as well, and he can make more than somebody who's signed to a major label because he ain't giving anybody anything. The money goes directly to him. From he's paid his taxes, he's good. So I can answer your question in a million ways, but my belief is you can make it. You can always make it if you have the talent, and if, unfortunately, the part that is always damning is you might need money because not everybody can come out the gate with a big hit. So you have to do a lot of grafting to get to where you can go, I don't need to worry about anything else. And that's Lola Young. When I saw her, I was like, wow. When I watched her on American television, and I knew she was going to get there, because once I started watching her in the UK in these little dive pits, there was only 200 or 300 people. But you know what? I only discovered her probably in the last couple of years. When I watched these dive pit concerts of 200-300 people, those 200-300 people knew every single word to all of her songs. That's when you know you're the one. You're one of those blessed people.
Yeah, you're definitely one of those ones because now it's all about go direct to consumer. Necessarily, you don't necessarily really have to have that mainstream stamp of validation anymore. If I could just cater to my fan base and them only, I could be content with doing it amongst myself. It's almost like in the US where if you're a regional act, I can just tour this region of the country, not have to go elsewhere, set up my spot to sell my merch during the show. I'm not getting no cut to the venue because most of these big venues they want a cut of the merch table and they want everything else. And I could just book it myself. I have my own booking company, and I could just be direct to where I'm not slivering the pie with
Mhm.
somebody else, I got the whole pie to myself.
Well, that's LaRusso, isn't it? He's the exact living embodiment of that. And when I watch him, the advancement of buying his own equipment, he has his own equipment. He has his own tour company. He's signing people. He's a different kind of artist. He's a business person as well as an artist. And then you start putting the right people around you.
Mm-hmm.
So you should always stay learning. Just because he's younger than me doesn't mean I can't learn from him.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Always be learning, and also never fight the wave. Go with the wave, because, like you mentioned in the previous conversation during this interview, that technology is always going to be advancing. The next thing is always going to be around the corner. It's going to be up to you whether to adapt or die. One of those two.
Yeah, dude. Thank you very much. It's
Yes,
been a
sir. Any
pleasure.
shouts you want to give before we wrap?
Shout out to my WTP family in Antigua. Shout out to my UK 246 family in Barbados. And shout out to my Soul family in the UK, the Boss Man, G Man, who has given me my start from Kiss Days. It's just been incredible. And shout out to my son, my grandkids, and all my people, my inner circle, which is very small indeed. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. And you can catch this interview wherever you stream podcasting on the official YouTube channel, youtube.com/beyond the album cover. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big thank you, a round of applause once again for my guy, Dave VJ. Dave, thank you for coming to Beyond the Album Cover once again, and you're more than welcome to come back anytime.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.